The narrative unfolds at the retirement celebration of Lin Dine, where the central character, alongside his companions, raised glasses filled with wine, subsequently sinking into a reflective atmosphere. He attentively absorbed their dialogues, feeling akin to a mere observer, as only a handful of close friends had gathered to honor him with gifts. The ambience was lively, yet he felt the weight of solitude, realizing the scant presence of guests. With a contemplative sigh, he rummaged through his wallet, recalling the substantial savings amassed over 2 decades of diligent labor, complemented by real estate holdings under his name. At that moment, he envisioned a tranquil conclusion to his days, a serene existence devoid of strife. However, as time ebbed, the protagonist abruptly regained consciousness, sitting upright in his bed, plagued by disorientation. This was not the reality he had anticipated. Gripping his temples in vexation, he lamented that he had awakened in the same student dormitory he occupied 2 decades prior. He hastily extracted his phone, querying the current year, only to confront the jarring truth: it was 2018. Enraged, he hurled the device against the wall, convinced this was an elaborate prank. A frustration surged within him as he questioned the rationale behind his inexplicable return to this juncture in time. After all, he had just begun to relish a life free from burdens. Leaning forward, he clutched his head, bewildered, pondering what transgressions had led to this predicament. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon the wristwatch adorning his wrist, an artifact bestowed upon him at his farewell party. It was a memento from Junoo, who had playfully remarked on its rarity, claiming it to be a relic of the fabled magician from the Byron continent. Tael Dien, staring intently at the watch, a thought struck him. Could this be the object that had ushered him back to the past? Memories of the previous night flooded his mind. He had meticulously examined the timepiece just before succumbing to slumber. Abruptly, a loud, insistent pounding echoed at his door, accompanied by a furious voice demanding silence and a swift exit from his room. The protagonist, harboring disdain, recognized the son of the hostel owner, an obnoxious figure who feigned authority while hosting raucous karaoke bashes and drinking sprees every night, only to extort money from him afterward. The man continued to berate him, threatening to break down the door if he didn't respond. Seething with irritation, Diane confronted him, the very thought of the man igniting his fury. Upon opening the door, he was met with a disapproving smirk. The interloper, unimpressed, questioned why Diane found amusement in the situation. Observing the man's monster skin jacket, Diane felt a surge of contempt. The man, scratching his head, complained about the noise disrupting his peace, humorously suggesting he might call the police but would overlook the disturbance if compensated. He extended his hand, eyeing the watch with greedy intent. Diane, incensed, retaliated with a swift blow to the arm, catching the man off guard. In a flurry of chaos, punches were thrown, and soon Diane found himself delivering a knee strike to the man's face, blood streaming from his nose. Yet, even amidst the scuffle, he contemplated the audacity of the larger man preying on the vulnerable. Stripping off the jacket that symbolized his irritation, he resolved that a single blow would not suffice for the transgressions he had endured. As the son of the hostel owner writhed in pain on the floor, Diane declared his intention to vacate the premises. Moments later, wandering the streets, he grappled with the bewildering reality of being thrust back into 2018. He recalled this as the year of an unfortunate accident at a construction site, which had left him with a knee injury that haunted him for years. Elated by the prospect of avoiding that fate, he concentrated on awakening the dormant mana within him, a skill honed over 2 decades. With newfound resolve, he clenched his fists, mindful of his undernourished physique and lack of muscle mass, lamenting his inability to work in such a condition. His stomach growled in protest, the need for sustenance became paramount. As he strolled further, he lamented the pervasive construction, realizing why the small gate went unnoticed. Many had perished due to the unexpected emergence of monsters. Suddenly, piercing screams shattered the air as people cried out about the appearance of beasts. Panic erupted on the streets as a swirling sphere of light and dark energy materialized. The protagonist's bewilderment morphed into urgency as he spotted a wild, red-spotted dog-like creature brandishing sharp fangs, a member of a predatory pack. An elderly man, eyes wide with terror, clutched Diane's shoulder, urging him to flee. Nearby, a frantic parent sought his missing daughter, Suka. Amidst the chaos, Diane felt a heavy dread, realizing he had been thrust back into a moment he despised. Resolute, he discarded his backpack and scanned the area for a weapon. Spotting a crowbar at the construction site, he seized it with determination. Just then, Suka's terrified cries pierced the tumult as monsters encircled her. In a flash, he grasped her hand, preventing her from falling prey to the jaws of death. Urging her to flee to safety. With the girl safely away, the monsters turned their ravenous attention toward him. He swung the crowbar with fervor, delivering a devastating strike to the nearest beast's face and jaw. The adrenaline surged as he fought, his stomach growling incessantly, reminding him of his dire hunger. He cast a predatory glance at the monsters, considering how plump and appetizing they appeared. Memories of savoring their flesh flooded his mind. He had once relished a delectable stew made from the meat of a wild red speckled dog. With a fierce hunger propelling him forward, he engaged in battle, dispatching monsters with calculated strikes. Though rejuvenated, he sensed the limits of his youthful vigor. Even at this age, his abilities paled compared to those he possessed at 40. Yet, the absence of knee pain invigorated him as he leaped, delivering a head kick to one of the creatures. Surrounded yet undaunted, he pondered the number of foes remaining, estimating around 10. A police officer rushed onto the scene, demanding to know his location and instructing him to follow his lead. Diane, frustrated by the damage to his jacket, the first time he had worn it, responded with exasperation. The officer, inching closer, apologized, expressing gratitude for Diane's valor in saving lives. Requesting his name and workplace for potential rewards, Diane introduced himself, clarifying he was not yet employed and had only awakened a few hours prior. As the officer scribbled his details, Diane pondered whether there was an alternate means to secure a reward, perhaps by providing his bank account information. The officer awkwardly consented, thanking him once more for his assistance. With that, Diane hastily departed, dismissing the officer's calls for him to wait. He dashed down the street, confident the officer had enough information to reach him. At that moment, various skilled professionals were already discussing the newly awakened individual, barely 20, whose heroics had not gone unnoticed. Later, at a local diner, Diane relished a steaming bowl of beef soup, savoring its delightful flavor. Suddenly, his phone rang, igniting curiosity about whether someone was already reaching out to him. With the demand for superhumans escalating, especially after witnessing his prowess during the recent turmoil, he felt the anticipation of newfound opportunities. As he contemplated the glowing screen of his mobile device, a realization struck him. It was now the year 2018, signifying that a span of 2 years had elapsed since the emergence of the previous epoch. The protagonist stared at his incessantly buzzing phone, inundated with notifications. This was it, his moment had arrived. He envisioned an avalanche of messages flooding his device. With a gentle sigh, he closed his eyes, setting the phone aside to ponder the current landscape. The realm of superhumans was now fraught with criminal elements, and a contingency plan to address the inevitable emergence of monstrous threats remained conspicuously absent. A cataclysm was imminent, one of the 6 disasters looming on the horizon. Resolutely, he raised 3 fingers, declaring that he would leverage his foresight to retire in 3 years, ensuring that his exit from this tumultuous life would be nothing short of magnificent. As he savored his meal, a sense of contentment washed over him, even as his phone continued its relentless chime. A cacophony of incoming messages. Kim Gilsu approached him, politely inquiring if he was indeed Dayan. Turning around, he smiled and introduced himself as the manager of the ruling family's guild. Having witnessed the video of his valiant battle against monsters, he was eager to forge a partnership. Just then, Baekhyun burst into the diner, calling for attention. She approached the protagonist, recognizing him as the star of the monster fighting footage, and complimented his even more striking presence in person. Within moments, a throng of admirers surged into the diner, clamoring for the protagonist's attention and revealing their guild affiliations. An atmosphere of chaos ensued, each vying for a moment of his time. Gilsa shouted for calm, asserting his claim to the protagonist, while another guild manager interjected, proclaiming their camaraderie and familial spirit. In a tone that brooked no nonsense, he threatened to withdraw from all offers should the noise persist. Later, at a nearby cafe, Diane sipped his coffee and stated he wouldn't take up much time, inquiring about the size of the bonus they could present for signing a contract. Gilsa raised a hand, politely indicating that certain clauses within the contract were confidential. When asked why he didn't listen to their offers one by one, Diane, enjoying a dessert, quipped if he was from the ruling family guild. Gilsa confirmed it with pride, adjusting his tie to emphasize the guild's esteemed history. He firmly expressed his wish for Diane to journey home safely, to which Diane blinked in confusion, asking what that meant. It soon became clear he had no intention of signing with such a poorly managed guild, especially as it was rumored to be on the brink of a merger. Pondering how long he should await the next enticing offer, a manager pitched a staggering $1 billion, while another countered with $1.1 billion, escalating the stakes to $1.2 billion and beyond. Amidst the flurry of numbers, the protagonist mused about what the Black Hounds Guild might offer, recalling his previous affiliation with them. Then, Yun W. settled across from him, boldly proposing $2 billion, alongside stellar benefits and quests for item acquisition. Their conditions were undeniably favorable, and she assured him he would never encounter such treatment elsewhere than with the White House Guild. Diane noted the guild's recent inception, yet foresaw its rise to one of Korea's top 3 guilds in 3 years. Smirking, he requested that everyone vacate the space except for Yun, suggesting they leave their business cards for future reference. The room fell silent for a moment before Yun confessed she had watched his combat video multiple times, enamored by his skills, stating he had been just an ordinary man until recently. Diane responded with a smile, recognizing her subtle probing for background information. As she handed him a stack of documents, she expressed confidence in his potential, claiming he possessed traits that would be advantageous in combat. She expressed the guild's desire to cultivate his talents for the future. Taking the documents, he reflected on how, in his past life, such an offer had been unimaginable. However, now, he had alternative ambitions. He asked if she would be amenable to negotiating a few additional conditions, to which she cheerfully agreed, observing as he crafted new stipulations within the contract. After reviewing his terms, she appeared baffled, covering her mouth in laughter, dubbing him a humorous individual with a knack for jokes. He calmly insisted his requests were serious, advising her to scrutinize the particulars more closely. Pointing to the document, she noted he was asking for a 4-day workweek, a punctual conclusion to the workday, and the right to decline protracted tasks. Angrily, she declared it must be a jest, but he maintained a serious demeanor, affirming these were indeed the terms he sought. Curiously, she questioned the source of his confidence, to which he replied that they wouldn't regret signing the contract. In a spirited outburst, she leaped from her chair, slamming her palms onto the table, assuring him she would reassess the contract's terms before returning in a few days. With a playful wink, she suggested their next meeting could involve drinks instead of coffee. Diane leaned back, a frown crossing his brow, realizing he could not be so easily swayed. He was aware of her familial ties to the guild leader. Rising from his seat, he slung his backpack over his shoulder, declaring the meeting fruitful, and resolved to proceed with registering as a superhuman. Sometime later, at the Disaster Control Center of the Korean branch, Shihan sat at her desk in the Superhuman Support Office, perplexed by his immediate registration request. With the designated personnel absent and her own inexperience weighing on her, she expressed her uncertainty. Diane, growing impatient, urged her to expedite the process. Fearfully, she promised to reach out to her supervisor, who, he surmised, would undoubtedly facilitate a swift resolution. As she communicated via telephone, informing her boss of the young man eager to register as a superhuman, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. Eventually, Shihan escorted him down the corridor, inquiring about any special abilities he possessed. With calm assurance, he claimed to rely solely on physical strength, concealing the truth of his extraordinary powers. She led him to the testing room, where he would demonstrate his capabilities. Holding a folder of documents, Shihan explained that the initial test would involve lifting a barbell. The protagonist approached the heavy weights, effortlessly hoisting them overhead with one hand, employing the mana coursing through his veins. Shihan, taken aback, acknowledged his superhuman strength. Astonished by his prowess, after a series of tests, she presented him with his temporary superhuman certificate, expressing her respect as she addressed him. Grateful, he accepted the document, which verified his identity under the hunting law. She assured him that they would notify him when the official certificate was ready. With a polite farewell, he exited the room, only to encounter Ju Seong W. Chihan, who greeted him exuberantly, her smile brightening the office. Shocked, the protagonist hastily departed, eager to distance himself from the superhuman support service that he perceived as a source of potential trouble. He silently vowed to avoid future encounters, steeling himself as he made his way past her. In a moment infused with curiosity, he inquired, his smile betraying curiosity, if a new superhuman had recently graced their presence. The response came from his employee, who, with a tinge of embarrassment, respectfully introduced the protagonist, revealing that it was indeed him she had been discussing over the phone. With a cheerful demeanor, he expressed keen interest in this so-called super novice. Not long thereafter, Diane arrived at the pollution control zone, surveying the desolation around him. The area appeared forsaken, ravaged, and overrun by monstrous entities. Yet, anticipation bubbled within him. Everything was poised for transformation when the spatial gate swung open. Beyond this threshold lay the continent of Gaia, a fantastical realm teeming with blades and magic. Within a year, the spatial gate was set to breach Earth's confines, heralding humanity's encounter with a new civilization. He stood by the tent, proclaiming with fervor that only one gate would materialize in Korea, precisely within this control zone. A surge of excitement coursed through him. The moment he received his signing bonus, he intended to claim ownership of this very site. After all, the opening of the gate would undoubtedly lead him to unimaginable wealth. As he rummaged through his backpack, preparing to unpack his belongings, a sudden, furious scream pierced the air. It was Lily, urgently imploring everyone to flee or face dire consequences. The protagonist, nestled within the confines of the tent, discerned the source of her wrath. Her voice dripped with fervor as she reiterated her warning: if they dared approach, they would all be doomed. A thought struck him. Wasn't that the dialect of Gaia? Rising with resolve, he activated his abilities, particularly a special skill known as concealment. Enveloped in a magical veil, he seamlessly melded into his surroundings, his presence obscured. This very skill had earned him a reputation for undertaking perilous reconnaissance, espionage, and covert eliminations. Stealthily maneuvering through the area, he resolved not to be ensnared by the chaos unfolding around him. As Lily's cries echoed, he pondered who had conjured the notion of trailing her. He needed clarity on the situation. A tempest swirled around her, with bandits encroaching upon her space. Lily, in a fit of rage, summoned her abilities, conjuring a fireball that ignited the atmosphere. Astonishment spread among the bandits as one of them cursed the unpredictable turn of events. "Is this a superpower?" another bandit queried, intrigue mingling with disbelief. Yet, Lily's fear of her own powers left her paralyzed. The protagonist, concealed nearby, pieced together her plight. She conversed fluently in Gaia's tongue and wielded powers from that realm. Could she truly be a refugee from Gaia? Alas, she had stumbled upon the wrong crowd. She was now ensnared by slave traders. A man adorned with a serpent tattoo approached, suggesting she submit and accompany them, hinting that she might change her mind for a morsel of food. The protagonist recognized the tattoo as a mark of the infamous Red Snake criminal syndicate, notorious for their involvement in human trafficking. With a flick of his wrist, he dispensed with the stealth, deciding it was time to intervene. He still had enough mana at his disposal. Drawing a knife, he struck with precision, plunging it into the back of one bandit. With a swift motion, he redirected his blade towards another's throat. The chaos erupted swiftly, and one bandit barely had time to question the fate of his comrade before being silenced. In the aftermath, Lily stood, wide-eyed and aghast, her hand covering her mouth in shock. Embarrassment washed over him. Killing in her presence felt like a violation of unspoken etiquette. He turned to her, querying whether she hailed from the continent of Gaia. A look of incredulity crossed her face as she asked how he could converse in her language. With a sheepish smile, he sheathed his weapon, only to be met with the loud rumbling of her stomach. "Do you enjoy meat?" he asked, amusement lacing his voice. After a brief pause, Lily, wiping remnants of food from her lips, expressed her gratitude, promising to repay his kindness one day. Curiosity piqued, he inquired about her appetite. "How many servings can you devour?" he jested, contemplating the prospect of treating her to pork. Awkwardly, she queried what he meant. Was she the sole traveler through the dimensional gate? She confirmed her solitary journey, her gaze dropping as she shared her reluctance to discuss her past. Determined to learn more about her, he persisted with questions, only to be met with a wall of silence regarding her age. She resolutely refused to answer. Eventually, he contemplated the situation, realizing he remained largely in the dark about her history. Yet, she called out for his assistance, desperation thick in her voice. She admitted her ignorance of this new world and her dwindling strength. Demonstrating her ability, she conjured a flickering flame, only for it to sputter and extinguish, frustration etched on her features. With a dismissive shrug, he crossed his arms, indicating that he was preoccupied and couldn't play the role of caretaker without a valid incentive. Her expression dimmed, a sigh escaping her lips as she gazed downcast. He declared that he would grant her 1 month, an ultimatum during which he would teach her the local language and impart essential knowledge about her surroundings. In return, she would assist with chores and errands. Lily's eyes sparkled with delight at the opportunity to remain by his side, her gratitude palpable as she agreed to his terms.